Hi there, and welcome back to the CKM Red Rugby League channel. It's been a while, I know. I just want to take this opportunity just to jump on and have a little bit of a chat, as well as going through some of the rugby league news this week. Obviously, the channel has been a little bit inactive. You know, life life gets the better of you sometimes. We are starting to move towards a different direction with how we do things at CKM Red Rugby League. You're going to start to see a lot more expansion content. You're going to start to see a lot more interesting content that not a lot of people are covering. Myself and Luke, we sat down, we had a chat about things, and we recognised the fact that everybody's kind of saying the same thing, but just in a different way. The NRL, Super League, they are big fish in little ponds. And you've got so many outlets covering the same stories, just at a slightly different angle. And we want to do things a little bit differently. We want to cover some more expansion content. We want to cover some more of the developing game, some of the things that are a little bit more interesting and unique to us, just because everybody's saying the same thing, just slightly different. Nobody's actually finding or breaking news. It's just we sit on Twitter all day and we wait for somebody with any sort of credibility to post something, and we all jump on the back of it. That's pretty much what rugby league social media is. I challenge you to, there are good outlets out there who do cover the NRL in slightly different ways and cover Super League in slightly different ways and provide a unique spin on things, but it's just not our style. It's not what we want, and we have lives away from this as well, and we've not really got that time to sit and just keep on going over and refreshing Twitter feeds and hoping that somebody does something or something happens where you've got content for the day. But that's just a very quick update on where we're at with things. And with that, then I think we should jump straight into our new look show. Myself and Luke, time zones permitting, because obviously I'm in Leeds in England. Luke is out in Sydney, Australia. So getting time zones to pair up is slightly challenging. But we will be trying to bring you at least one live show here a week where we jump on, we interact with you guys. So please do leave any comments, ask any questions, get involved with any of the topics. We'd love to hear your viewpoints on things, but we'll jump straight into our first topic, and that is off the back of Jared Haynes' sentencing that two players are now, one investigation concluded, one currently under investigation. That's, of course, the case of Tony Williams versus the NARL, and Krisnan Inu as well, who is currently playing at Salford. Is although there's no official word yet, he's currently on suspension. But Jared Haynes, of course, sentenced due to rape, but he is reportedly going to be challenging that. Just want to take a second to really acknowledge the guys over at the NARL and the exceptional work that they're doing and taking a stance against this. Tony Williams put out an Instagram post basically victim shaming, and it's just, everyone is entitled to an opinion, but not all opinions are entitled to be void of consequence. And if you're going to air your opinion, you need to be aware of backlash. You need to be aware of the fact that not everybody's going to agree with it. That's why it's social media. Have conversations amongst friends in safe spaces amongst like-minded people. Go for it. But when you're in the online world where people who have been victims of similar experiences or know victims of certain experiences, if you are a public figure and you then start essentially bashing the thing that's currently in court and getting a lot of heat, then you are going to be putting yourself straight in the firing line. And the guys over at New York, they acknowledge that getting someone like Tony Williams, ex-Australian international, NRL forward, a guy with real pedigree, to sign for them was a big deal. And they didn't put him on a pedestal at all. They acknowledged that his standpoint on things wasn't the right one to take, and that he put his point across in the wrong way and terminated his contract with immediate effect. And in a week where Super League has experienced, the Tony Club incident with Andre Saviello, and the fact that he's on an 8-game suspension for that, with a fine associated to it as well. It seems a bit of a light punishment. And, I'm not here calling for any heads or anything. It's just that I think if you take 13 seconds before a game to acknowledge that prejudice and racism has no place in a game, but then just give somebody an 8-game ban, it's potentially not the right message that you send. If I was to go to work and throw out a derogatory term, chances are I probably don't have a job come 4 o'clock. It's as simple as that. And I don't think that athletes should be any different. I don't think it should be a case of you have a platform and therefore you get a bit of a light tap on the wrist. But the NARL have made their standpoint on things very clear. And so the guys at New York Freedom putting out a post within hours saying that they've acknowledged the post and have spoken to Tony and let him know that he's no longer welcome at the club. And I think that's really how you really hammer home a point. Make sure that these things are not going to happen again. Making sure that if there is a conversation to be had about these things, that it's done in a constructive manner rather than just bashing victims and calling people out, calling out the justice system. If you believe it's not the right thing, I mean, I'm all for supporting friends. If you've got a friend who's going through something and you believe that they're innocent, put your point across that you are there supporting your friend. Do not go after the victim. Do not go after the people who are associated with the victim, because that's the point where you start to cross the line of you're no longer in a position of support, you're on the attack. And the guys over at the NARL doubled down on the New York Freedom's standpoint on this and said that they're fully in support of it and that they will not be taking any sort of, they will not be basically falling back on their morals for anybody. So, really well done for them. I think it's the right stance to take, especially in such a challenging time in the game. But, moving on to a little bit more positive news from the NARL, they've just gone through some of their combines. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept of combine, it's something that's more unique to the NFL, in which players will attend and go through certain drills in order to try and get a playing spot. So, putting them through strength drills, speed, conditioning, all those things in a bid to try and get an NARL contract. And, again, coming back to some positive work that they are doing out there, Rob Curtis, who is the COO of the NARL, linking up with the WWE out there down in Miami, and linking up with a former Bronco as well in Daniel Vido, who's, of course, in the WWE now after leaving rugby league to pick up a contract there. Doing some really good promotional work before heading out to Washington for the DC Cavalry's combine. And I've seen a few pictures and a few videos. And rugby league in America is going to be huge. It is going to be massive, and I highly recommend anybody who has a slight interest in it, pick your team now and run with it, because although people's biggest call out of American Rugby League right now is that they don't have any homegrown athletes. Like, there's very few people in America, that are waking up one day and being, okay, I want to be a rugby league player. There's no kids in school that are saying, when I grow up, I want to be a rugby league player. That will change over time. The same thing didn't happen in the UK when rugby league first started. And you need to realise that American Rugby League, although it's been about for a little while, it's still very much in its infancy. So the guys over out there in the States are doing a great job with that, and we are very much reliant on fallout athletes. So those guys that don't make it to the NFL, those guys that don't make it to the NBA, even people that grow up playing football and want to try something a little bit more physical. American Rugby League is very reliant on them, and to get that pull of players is going to be very, very important, and get those players working the right way, get them in a rugby mindset, and then they will start to attract family members. If they've got young kids, they'll get them involved, and that's how a whole player pool starts to develop. And to be honest, based on the things I've seen, I can only see the NARL being a resounding success. And if you do have an interest in watching the NARL as well, that is going to be live and exclusive on SportsFlick. So head over to SportsFlick, download their app. I think it's something like $3.99 a month. I mean, the competition literally starts in about a month's time. 6th of June, everything kicks off. Everyone's building up their rosters now. New signings are being announced on a near daily basis by teams. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see. And there's a few players converting for rugby union as well, and it's not very often that you get union players coming to league in their prime. So that can only be a positive thing. Okay, and with that, then we'll move on to topic number 2. Let's take some time to talk about Serbian Rugby League as well. Congratulations to Partizan, who took out a big win yesterday in the Serbian Cup final, winning 80 points to 8 against Radnički Niš, potentially bringing in a new era in Serbian Rugby League and really building the hype around that again. One of the big fears that many people have had around Serbian Rugby League is the fact that there's been a period of one-team dominance for a long time. You go back as many as 20, 30 years, it was Dortmund. Dortmund winning everything. In fact, maybe about a year ago, there was a post up on Twitter about teams with the most domestic trophies, and Dortmund were out there by an absolute landslide. They had something like 33 domestic titles, which is an incredible feat considering how dominant, and just really highlights how dominant they were and how strong they were at being able to dominate that competition for many, many years and maintain that player pool as well. So now you're starting to see it become a little bit more of a two-horse race, and with teams like Radnički Niš, Novi Beograd, and the Dortmund Tigers as well, it's going to be interesting to see how Serbian Rugby League shapes up, and the fact that it's not going to be a one-team competition anymore. For a few more years, it is probably going to be Red Star and Partizan in the same conversation, but over time, you're going to start to see more teams getting involved, more teams getting amongst it. And you know what? It's really positive to see. It's indicative of the growth and development that's been put into the game and the hard work as well. The Serbian Rugby League's been going for a long time, and those people that have been putting in the work behind the scenes, they're starting to see some of the reward for their hard work now, and some of those real pioneers of the game. So, come 2025, 2029, when World Cups roll around, don't be surprised to see the likes of Serbia in and amongst it after a lot of development work has been put in out there. But speaking of the World Cup as well, 2 teams that not many people expected to see there in the conversation just announced that they'll be playing an international test match as well. Greece and Jamaica will be playing in October at the Castleford Stadium at the Menderhors. As part of the World Cup warm-up. And I think it's also doubling up as Jordan Turner's testimonial match, I think I read somewhere as well. But, how great is it to see Jamaica and Greece in that conversation? The guys over at Jamaica have been putting in a lot of work for many, many years. I've had plenty of conversations with Romeo Monteith and Roy Calvert, some of the guys over on the island who've been really grafting to make sure that there's that developing domestic pool, and rather than relying purely on heritage players. So it's great to see that. And Greece as well, you go back a year now, I think it was, they were outlawed. Red Star have played out in Greece, had to play under cover of darkness, had to play in private stadiums because of an incident in which Greek Rugby League was essentially outlawed. And now to see them make a World Cup, to see them bans being lifted and seeing them getting involved and playing, at the World Cup on the world stage. Nobody's going to come in. Nobody's expecting Greece to come into the World Cup and make it out the groups. That's not what it's about. It's about the fact that they're there at all. And that's going to be huge for the Greek profile. It's going to do great things for the people back in Greece and be able to build that platform. It also gives them leverage to go back to the government as well and say, we need funding for our game. We need to be able to pump a little bit of money into our game and be able to see what we can do to develop this game. We've made one World Cup. It'd be a complete regression if we didn't make the next. So, massive congratulations to Jamaica, massive congratulations to Greece, and I for one can't wait to see them go head to head over at Castleford. But sticking with the point of Castleford as well, we'll go over to the Women's Super League. Of course, it's the Challenge Cup today. Few teams in action, and one of those teams in action is, of course, the York City Knight Ladies, and they have named 5 of their new signings. For those that aren't aware, basically the Castleford Tigers have been one of the premier teams of the competition in sort of the last year or two, littered with international stars, really, really strong team. And then news came out that their head coach, the woman who's been running things for the longest amount of time now, Lindsay Anfield, would be leaving. Rumblings then started to emerge online about the fact that there would be players going with her in the opposite direction. Kelsey Gentles, Rihanna Marshall, Tamsin Renoff, Sinead Peach, and Grace Field all released with immediate effect earlier this week by the Castleford Tigers and announced the same day by the York City Knights. Now, I've seen a little bit of backlash online about this, and people going after the players in particular, talking about loyalties, talking about sponsorships and all this thing. But what people need to understand is that the women's game is not governed the same way that the male game is right now. The women's game, there's no contracts, there's no obligations. Okay, you turn up, you train, you're an unpaid athlete. Okay, you put on apps, you put on broadcasts, you're expected to do interviews and media obligations and all these things, but you don't get the same level of perks that the male game does. You're not paid. You have to find time amongst that between working. You finish work, you go training. It's essentially an amateur setup with a professional backdrop. And that's what the women's game is right now. So while ever women are not governed by contracts, they have the opportunity to move clubs. And one of the real worries that many people have actually had is the fact that the women's game is at massive risk of collapsing on itself because of, this very top-heavy, your top 4 teams versus your bottom 4 teams are going to be blowouts. You saw that last week in the Women's Super League, 70-0. Leeds Rhinos going, I think it was 70-0 in that game, almost a point a minute. And that really takes away the appeal of the women's game, unfortunately, because people are not going to want to sit through and be a part of that experience, especially if you're a fan of one of these teams. You're going to become disheartened very fast if you're a Featherstone fan or if you're a York fan. You're not going to have that great of interest in seeing your team get drummed every week when you play a Leeds, when you play a Wigan. So it's great to see players going to teams where there is less chance of that happening. Amy Hardcastle moved to Saints from Bradford. Bradford are very much a bottom 4 team right now. And Amy Hardcastle, an England international, Bradford's only England international at the time, now moving to Saints. The Saints are one of the more dominant teams in the competition. They're probably one of the favourites to win the competition this year. So, and again, because she's not governed by a contract, because she's not held in place by those obligations, she has the right to pick her team of choice and go there, because you only get a short career. If you're in a team that's constantly conceding points, you never get to show your ability to attack. You never get to show your ability with the ball. You spend your entire game defending, and then you're not at your best when you miss a tackle. And that can be the difference between an England selection and not getting into the England squad. And female players recognise that. Whenever you're not played, you need to then go for whenever you're not paid, you need to go for the experience, you need to go for the memories. Okay, and you need to have a little bit of a legacy to leave yourself behind. You cannot build that legacy. You cannot get into an England setup. You cannot be part of something special if you are constantly getting drummed week in, week out, or having to wait to play against teams that are more on your level. But even then, there's no England talent scouts about because they're watching Leeds versus Castleford where there's 12 already international players playing. And that's just indicative of the women's game right now. So to see York stepping up and being able to recruit as well as they have in recruiting, former Leeds Rhinos head coach Adam Cuthbertson, who's of course playing at York now, Lindsay Anfield, the former Castleford coach, and then those players going across with her makes this Women's Super League competition the most exciting competition that there's been for a long time, because you're not talking about the same couple of teams anymore. You've got a much more even spread and distribution of talent. Coming to the sponsors, all these women have took their sponsors across with them to their new clubs. Because what you need to understand as well is that because the women's game hasn't got the largest following yet, most of the people who are sponsoring players are sponsoring the players themselves. They're not sponsoring them because they're Castleford players. They're sponsoring them because they're family friends who happen to have businesses. They are relatives. They are close personal friends. And they don't care which team they pull a jersey on for. They just want to associate themselves with that player. So nobody's getting done out of any sort of financial gain here. Nobody's getting disrupted. It's just when the women's game is in the current setup that it is, there's going to be player movement, and sponsors accept that risk. It's no different in Super League. You see players get released. They might have a sponsor as well. Or you see a player come up with a mid-season transfer. It's no different. So I don't see why people should be going after players online. But, in a more positive note, the Women's Super League is probably at its most exciting now. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that develops. But I think that'll do us there. I just wanted to do a very quick broadcast, get a feel of whether you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please do let us know. If you want to see more of this style of content, leave a like, drop a comment, and thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great Sunday, and I will catch you next time.